Next up we have Alejandro Cremades. Alejandro is the founder and CEO of Rock the Post, an online investment platform that connects high-quality entrepreneurs with accredited investors interested in investing in exciting new startup companies. Please welcome to the stage, Alejandro.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. As they kindly introduced me, my name is Alejandro, and I have the privilege of being one of the founders of this platform that is called Rock the Post. So it's actually an honor to be here as well with all of you today. And essentially what I'm going to be discussing and presenting is why there is a need for an investment model, a new investment model that is going to serve to finance these small businesses that are in the US. As you probably all know, there is 500,000 new small businesses that launch every month in the US, according to the Kaufman Foundation, and there is 6 million on a yearly basis. So with that in mind, I would like to frame the conversation that I'm going to be having here with you guys today, and essentially start by outlining the different methods that entrepreneurs have today to be able to get access to capital. So obviously the first one is credit cards. Then we have grants, we have bank loans, we also have VCs, and we have angels and friends and family. So, for example, the credit cards, we all know how that normally goes. It's quite addictive. Once you pop, you cannot stop. So I wouldn't recommend that to anyone here in this room today. Also, the bank loans have been at the worst levels, really in issuing loans since the 1940s. So good luck with that route as well. And then we have as well the angels and also the friends and family, which we will talk about that a little bit later during the presentation. But then I want to really discuss what it means, the venture capital industry at a seed stage. So if we take a look at this graph, the venture capital industry for early stage is right now at 20.1 billion. It has very stagnant for the past several years. And as you see there, it has been even decreasing because on the .com, as you see there on the graph, we had around 1,000 firms that were really providing capital to early stage startups. And then once we had that bursting, it went all the way down to 400. So when I say this, I'm really referring to venture capital firms that have under management 5 million. So it is very, very hard, especially when we look at this next slide, where we see that just 3% of that is really oriented to seed type of deals. So we've come to a point that for the most part, that 3% essentially means that only 3,148 companies are able to get a VC check. I think that that's quite crazy, having in mind the amount of companies that launch every year in the US. There's a lot of them that actually are suffering to find that initial capital to get things in motion. And out of the 3,148 companies that get that check, only 1,000 are new companies, and then the other ones are current portfolio companies that the VC essentially has. So moving to the next slide, as you see here, there was a report that was issued by the Kaufman Foundation, and essentially what they did is they followed 100 venture capital firms for about 10 years, and during that time frame, they were able to discover that 62% of the venture capital funds underperformed, and that was in comparison with the returns that the public markets would give. So what does that really tell us? That tells us that even the glorified VC people also don't have a very good batting average. And that is where we really base the thesis, where we decided to essentially build the Rock the Post platform, which is to erase gatekeepers and also to take out the middlemen so that these 6 million startups that launch every year can have a better chance at getting financed. So this little paragraph that you guys see up there really summarizes what my team and I are essentially doing on a daily basis, working very hard really to democratize access to capital and to provide these individuals and entrepreneurs with a better way to get that initial funding to get their projects in motion. Also, we have several tools that help not only the investors but also the entrepreneurs to make the right decisions. Because when you want to really engage in any type of communication interaction, you need to have that human component, and that's stuff that I would say that most people are not really taking into consideration. Because when you look at the seed type of offerings, we're looking at entrepreneurs that don't really have that product or that incredible traction. I remember I was having a conversation some time ago with David Tisch, which is one of the founders of Techstars, and he told me, Alejandro, the earlier you are in your stage as an entrepreneur, the harder it is to get access to VC funding. And the reason for that is because either you know one of these VC people and you've been in their network for quite some time, or otherwise it's really hard to convince them to give you that financing, or if you have an incredible amount of traction, or if you're a serial entrepreneur. For the most part, especially, even myself, I am a first-time entrepreneur, so I am sure that many of the people here that are going to be pitching today might relate to my story. So it's even harder to be able to convince these people that you're the right person to execute. So anyways, with that in mind, we feel that the crowdfunding platforms will really provide a new way for these people to get access to financing. And as you see on this next slide, the online fundraising market has been growing like crazy. Over the past 5 years, we have, as you see there, 635% increase. So that's quite impressive. And as you see, here we have 3 different markets that up until now, were never streamlined altogether. So the friends and family, according to the Kaufman, is a $100 billion market. The angel investors are at $20.1 billion. And then we have the venture capitals at $20 billion. We were discussing earlier, actually, Sherwood and also Chance were discussing how the Title II is really going to be affecting the way people are fundraising, especially on platforms like, for example, it could be Crowdfunder or the other ones that are going to be presenting today, or even Rock the Post. The problem was that we have a lot of restrictions. Some of these restrictions are related to Title II of the Jobs Act, or Title III of the Jobs Act, which is Title II, essentially the general public solicitation, or Title III, the fact that only accredited investors, which is just 1% of the US population, can have access to issuing these types of checks to early stage companies. So with regards to I want to take a step back and analyze that Title II with all of you all here, is that once we have that being implemented, and I remember discussing with some of my colleagues in the space when all this craziness happened last week of the voting from the SEC. We were essentially predicting that the implementation could potentially be in September, mid-September, and we feel that that's the time where this industry is essentially going to explode. Not only with that Title II implemented, but also with the Title III, of course. But the Title II really is going to give the possibility to entrepreneurs to advertise. That is something that entrepreneurs were not able to do for the past 100 years. And that means that people were not able to put maybe, advertise really their offering on social media. By the way, social media would add additional transparency. So even Fred Wilson, for example, was mentioning that the online fundraising, once we streamline all these 3 together and we have the Jobs Act in place, we could be looking potentially at an industry of over $300 billion. So as you see here, it's very easy to do the math and to come to the conclusion that we're looking potentially at a $140 billion industry, which is huge. And this is really going to help startups to get that initial capital and to get their projects in motion. So to date, our platform, and I'm not trying to make marketing here, but just to give you guys a perspective of why platforms are already making a huge impact today. For example, Rock the Post has been able to raise for their startups over $4.1 million, and we've made over 2,000 introductions. So with the limitations that I was explaining earlier with the Title II and the Title III of the Jobs Act, just imagine in a beautiful world, once the SEC issues the regulations, how incredible we could all grow and how much money we would be able to provide to startups. So the two big problems. What are the two big problems here that we're facing? There's two sides of the equation here. The first one is obviously for the entrepreneur, that they're struggling to find access to capital. Let me ask the crowd here today, how many of you have heard of Pandora, the online radio? Raise your hand. Awesome. So Pandora was rejected over 300 times before they were able to secure access to capital. Imagine all the days, that emotional roller coaster that they had to go through. Imagine if they would have given up on the 299th try, what would have happened with that company? You know, we would have never had that billion-dollar company that did an IPO recently, providing so many jobs for the US. So the other problem that we see is that investors get overwhelmed. Out of the 8.7 million accredited investors that are currently in the US, only 700,000 of them, according to a Reynolds report, are actually making active investments in startup companies in the US. So what does that tell us? That there is a lot of startups out there, and a lot of startups that are trying to compete for the same checks. And the problem that these investors have sometimes is that they don't find a way to standardize all the applications that they receive, so in the end they are overwhelmed with their inbox about to explode and not really being able to make smart decisions. So the two big problems that I just mentioned, I believe, that are being addressed with investment crowdfunding. For example, on Rock the Post, the average that normally takes you to raise a seed round is around 8 months. Just imagine the amount of time that you would waste going to meetings that they would make you wait for 15 minutes or more. I think we all know that story. Going to networking events where you need to meet people to try to increase your network. I believe that with the online world today and with the fundraising that is done with platforms that are involved in the investment crowdfunding, is going to change substantially, because now there's thousands of people that are going to be looking at you, as opposed to having to do the one-on-one type of facing, which it really takes a lot of time. And then the other thing that we're looking at here is the fact and the possibility that entrepreneurs and also investors have the right tools and are being armed online via these platforms with the potential of being able to do the due diligence process right off the bat with the other individual that they're interacting with, so that they're better to make a better judgment. So with that in mind, I would like to thank you very much for listening and for keeping up with this Spanish accent of mine. And I will be more than happy to answer any questions later on the American Express Open Forum. Thank you.